What's going on YouTube? Kronos here and welcome back to another PSO2 video. So in today's video, we're going to be going over all of the prep that I did for all my weapons, my units, and all that sort of stuff moving forward toward NGS, and why it might be a good idea for you to go ahead and prep, and why it might not be. Honestly, it's something reasonable you shouldn't worry about. But before we jump into that, guys, if you're new to the channel, my name is Chrono. I do content over here on YouTube daily. Would much appreciate it to subscribe as we are going to continue to do content moving forward into NGS. Tons of helpful tips, at least to the best of my ability, and information, as well as gameplay videos, and pretty much everything that we're doing, everything that we're working on as it becomes relevant. But let's go ahead and jump into this. So first disclaimer, because I'm going to start this at the very beginning of the video because I get this question all of the time and everyone has something to say about it. Everyone has a different opinion. Preparation for NGS is not absolutely needed. However, because we've been playing PSO2 for so long, because we have access to so many resources, preparation can be used to your advantage moving forward into NGS. But the materials as well as the money spent is not moving into NGS. So as far as worth goes, when you ask, is it worth preparing for NGS? It's not costing you anything but time. So if you don't have the time, then no, it may not be worth it for you. But if you have the time available and you have the resources available, it is basically costing you nothing because none of this is going to be useful moving forward into NGS. All these materials, all these items, all these things are only a part of base PSO2, which is primarily the reason why I prepared the way that I did, because honestly, as I went on, I realized just how much I could get away with using. Now, if you're someone who's like, I'm still missing emotes that I want to get a hold of, I'm still saving up for fashion, so on and so forth, you can do some basic prep and still get away with getting exactly what you need without breaking the bank. Now, I personally probably spent close to, between everything and testing and a bunch of other stuff, I want to say about 300 mil overall, but I'm also a player that had access to around 500 plus mil, and then some, and I did make a few mistakes as far as purchasing a few things, and I was a bit more liberal with my money because I had access to so much of it. Essentially, I skipped over grinding a couple of things that I could have just went ahead and got from doing content by just forking over the cash for it, because in reality, I didn't want to have to stop to actually grind anything to make any of my stuff. However, there are quests such as Cradle, there are quests like HTPD, if you can actually complete it, that are very, very useful in helping you prep for NGS. And we're going to go over exactly what you got access to. So let's go ahead and get started. So before we jump into exactly what we have as far as NGS goes, I'm going to go ahead and pull up a small little chart for you guys. That way you guys can see exactly what weapons and units are going to be moving forward into NGS. So in case you're unaware, 1 to 6 stars. Now this counts for weapons and units. So rarity of weapons obtained in PSO2. The rarity of weapons in PSO2 obtained in PSO2. Rarities of PSO2 obtained weapons and units will be converted into PS2 NGS below. So 1 to 6 stars will be 1 stars. 7 to 12 stars will be 2 stars. 13 to 14 stars will be 3 stars. And 15 stars will be 4 stars. So with this in mind, basically what that's letting us know is weapons within this category are all going to be the same power. Weapons within this category, same power. Weapons within this category, same power. Weapons within this category, same power, from just the weapons perspective. So we can decide exactly what we want to pick up and how useful certain weapons are going to be versus other weapons itself. Now, essentially, it does let us know that units will not be visible. Units will not be visible, and the equipment section name for back, arms, and legs will be changed to unit 1, 2, and 3. The back, arms, and legs units you obtain for PS2 will be armors that fill each of those slots. And then weapons at 35 will go to enhancement 40, as well as units at 10 will go to enhancement 40 as well. So with this in mind, all we'll be worried about doing here, there's one other thing, weapon elements and element levels will be negated and set to 0 in NGS. Weapon and armor obtained during play in PSO2 can be enhanced up to plus 40. So basically what this is letting us know is that our max upgraded and grind weapons and units will be at max upgrades and grinds for NGS, as well as elements are not going to matter. We don't need to worry about that whatsoever. And we know we have each of these slots going to be covered. So we're not going to have back, arms, and legs, just unit 1, 2, and 3. So we'll be able to put those in those respective slots, and we'll be able to take advantage of all of the stats that come along with those units. So with that in mind, we know that we want units in each category, weapons in each category. At least for me personally, again, this is my silent, this is what I did to prepare. But units in each category, weapons in each category, The actual power of the weapons, the star unit of the weapon, only going to matter between these little categories itself. So 1 to 6 star all going to be the same, 7 to 12 star going to be the same, 13 to 14 star going to be the same, and 15 star going to be the same as well. Well, it's only 15 stars, so yeah. As far as when you'll be able to use these weapons, now in CBT1 or closed beta test 1, the level requirement was, of course, 1 star being 1. 2 stars were 5 stars. I'm sorry, 2 stars were level 5, and 3 stars were level 10, where 15 stars or 4 stars were level 15. So we had the 5, 10, 15 route. In closed beta test 2 and in the global beta test, they had shifted those numbers down to 4, 8, and we can only assume 12 respectively. I'm going to say 12 because that's what makes sense. It might be 13, it might still be 15, we don't know for certain, but because we didn't have access to any 4-star weapons in the closed beta test to be able to figure that out. So the best we had were 3-star weapons, and those 3-star weapons required level 8 to equip. So again, this is just a guess based on what we had beforehand. So now we have an idea of everything that we're going to be looking at. We know exactly all of the weapon types, all the categories we're going to need. We know the weapons that are going to be coming out, and of course you can keep in mind what you're going to be what you're planning on playing as far as what is going to be useful for you. So let's jump over back to PSO2 and let's take a look at what we actually grabbed. So as far as weapons go, I went again in those categories. Now for the choice of 1 to 2 star weapons, I just went with high slot weapons because I didn't feel like affixing them. I'm just not going to go through affixing all of these weapons. It just seems silly, and it's a lot of extra resource or a lot of extra time spent, which granted I probably could, but as you guys will see, I already did quite a bit of affixing, and it was, I think we spent maybe 2 days streaming, just prepping, and it was probably about close to maybe 11 hours overall. So, which was a fun time. I streamed it, had a good time. You guys were a blast. So, and you guys who hang out over on stream, much appreciated. Anyway, let's go ahead. We have the Vita Sword. And what I did when I was looking for these sorts of things, I was just looking for main stat damage increasing stats itself, because all of these are going to be homogenized into just stat gain. It's not going to be like, you know, melee, ranged, or tech power. It's just straight up stat itself. Anything that's increasing damage is going to just increase damage in NGS. So what I looked for was anything within 7 to 8 slots that primarily had stat gains. So in this case, it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that all, you know, equate to damage, stamina really not being that great. So 6 out of 7 augments were, you know, set it to damage. So that was enough for me. I went ahead and upgraded this to plus 35. And then, of course, these all start at plus 30, so you need duplicates of them. Went ahead and bought, of course, just extra 5 Vita swords. They're very inexpensive, very cheap. Now, I will say at this point in time, they are getting a bit more expensive getting a lot of these weapons, but if you're someone who can do things like maybe divide quests or anything along those lines, you should take the time, go ahead and do them. High slot Vita weapons and high slot weapons that between these categories are selling for a decent amount. Or, of course, you can just spend your money because that money's not going into NGS anyway. So from there, I went ahead with my next choice was a 10-star sword. Again, same mindset. So we're not going to go over it every single time, but we just picked a 10-star sword, did the exact same thing, got the duplicates, put it at plus 35, so it'll be plus 40 when we get over to NGS. So our 3-star choice is actually an Atlas weapon. We specifically made Atlas weapons because, one, we had 9 stones to make Atlas weapons, and they were not too difficult to make. Now here's the kicker and the difficult part of this process though. It requires the gold mats and sapphire. So if you don't have money sitting around to be able to purchase those, you may have to farm the resources to get them. Now that's up to you individually. You technically don't have to go the route of picking up these weapons. You can just skip 3-star weapons or pick them up from NGS. But part of what I didn't want to do in NGS when it comes out is spend resources on leveling gear. Resources were used across the board for a ton of stuff, and a lot of them were completely sellable. We ended up, I don't want to say hard locking ourselves, but because, you know, everyone was playing, pushing themselves forward as much as possible, you ran out of resources very quickly, and the name of the game very much became Genshin Impact for a while, where we were just running around breaking stones looking for resources, and we were kind of stopped up on our progression because of it. I will be leveling basically every class in the game all the way to cap, not rushing them, but playing them as I go along, playing with viewers, playing with friends, so on and so forth. And one thing I don't want to do is think about the gear that I'm equipping to go help them level and go play and have a good time. So the fact that I'll have gear already, I'll just be able to toss it on and then just keep the ball rolling and have a good time. So that's the idea behind having these weapons ready itself, and of course these 3 stars. Now, this is a conversation we're going to have really quick right now. as far as augments go, because there is a reason for having these S grade augments on there, and there's a reason why I picked Atlas weapons. So Atlas weapons were picked primarily because 1, they're of course within the 3-star category, and 2, they have the most S grade augment slots. S grade augment slots are pretty powerful, and they're fairly easy to get a hold of. The ones I picked were the ones that I knew I could get a hold of, then I have to worry too much about, and also be able to just print them consistently. So we have Petal Gleam, where I had a weapon that dropped that prints Petal Gleam. I believe it's a 15-star. We'll grab it in just a bit, and I'll show you guys exactly which one it is. Lucid Diversity, which honestly is one of the best S2 slots moving into NGS. It gives you damage, and I believe PP cost reduction or just PP regeneration. I can't remember exactly which one it is. We'll take a look at a chart that I'll show you guys in just a little bit. Aggressive Will was just standard damage 1%, which is pretty useful in NGS, of course, when it transfers over. And then Escalating Pursuit. The way this is worded, Escalating Pursuit is borderline broken in NGS. So every weapon that could have an S4 slot, I put Escalating Pursuit in it, and it is set up in that sort of way. So basically, at least, again, the way it was worded, didn't have any sort of cooldown. 50% of the damage you dealt with the PA was applied to the next PA. Pretty crazy. So Escalating Pursuit is literally going to be everywhere. This is basically the S1 through S4 you're going to see on all of my weapons moving forward. Primarily because 1, Aggressive Will is fairly inexpensive since Luther dropped it like crazy. Even if there weren't a bunch of them available, you could run Luther and get it pretty easily. As I was saying before, I was rudely interrupted. I apologize about that. But as far as getting hold of Aggressive Will, super easy. You get it from running Omega Luther. He drops tons and tons of them. You can get like the 4-man triggers for it and run it with a couple of friends. Or if you're feeling, feeling froggy, run it solo and see if you can take him down on your own. But fairly inexpensive as far as this is concerned. So I'm going to show you guys really quick what I use to print S1s and S2s. I held off of showing these, held off of making this video because of one of these being purchasable on the market. And if you guys were around the YouTube, or not around the YouTube, I'm sorry, around on the Twitch channel, you'll know that the moment I mention something being fairly inexpensive or fairly useful, it immediately goes up in price. And unfortunately, we don't really have much control over that. I'm not going to sit and hide a bunch of things from everyone. There's no sort of ranking or anything along those lines. And even now more than ever, money is not that specifically useful unless you're really, really far behind. So again, sorry to anyone who this was affected by. I mean, as content creators, our goal here is to share knowledge with as many people that are looking to find that information. And I want to help out as many people as I possibly can. So we just kind of talk about it. But again, I also understand that it's not fair that, you give away market secrets immediately. So I went ahead and held off on this just for you guys. But here are my 2 weapons that I use to print S1s and S2s. I'll talk about them really quick here. If I can find them in this gigantic mess of all these weapons that I happen to have. So this is a 15-star that dropped, the Hard Cross Bullet. I don't remember exactly where it dropped from. You'll have to check the wiki, which I'll leave a link in the video description too. That way you guys can check this out. But essentially what this was is the SAF for this weapon, you check the augment factor, is Petal Gleam. So what I did was purposely down slot it and let it fail augments all the way down to like 1 slot, almost nothing. And then I would just go and purchase a 1-slot weapon from the vendor, walk over to Duty Harmonica, affix it with that 1-slot weapon, and I would always have access to Petal Gleam. Then take Petal Gleam and S-grade augment transferred over onto every weapon that I want. As you can see, every weapon that can have it has it. So super cool there. Let me see really quick because I think I saw something in here that wasn't supposed to. Oh yeah, these don't need to be here. Let's put that into here. And the Shinome weapons were a series. I believe were part of like Easter. They've been out for a little while. Told that you can also get them in Divide quests. But these just straight up, oh yeah, well, you see what happened to the prices of them already. But these just straight up print Lucid Diversity 2, which again is one of the strongest S-grade augments moving into NGS. So you're able to just print Lucid Diversity 2 off of these Shinome weapons. They're running right now about, I want to say close to 8 to 9 mil on ship 1. I'm sure the prices are differ depending upon the ship that you're on, but take advantage of it if you get the chance. Honestly, even at their current asking price, that's still pretty freaking amazing for how good these weapons actually are. So I use those 2 to print S1s and S2s. Again, Aggressive Will is pretty cheap. And then Escalating Pursuit, I did get some help from the Twitch chat on this one because I have made a ton of weapons. And I've made some weapons that have gone over to other ships. So unfortunately, I didn't have a ton of money to work with, or sorry, a ton of badges to work with. But you can purchase Escalating Pursuit from the Rising Weapon Badge shop for Rising Weapon badges. I believe it's 600 total. You can also buy it off of the market. People are purchasing with the Rising Weapon Badge 5s and then just selling the Escalating Pursuits because they know how useful they are and people are going to want them. So that's super cool. But as far as preparation goes, that stays the same for the 1 through 3 star slots. 4-star slots is a little bit different. It just depends on what I had access to overall. So in this slot, you're either going to find one of 3 weapons. Either you're going to find a Rinzer, you're going to find a Flexio, which for all intents and purposes are basically the same thing. It's just the different color palette. Or you're going to find a light weave. So I happen to have access to extra light weaves, and there were certain class of weapons that I knew I was going to play more. I really wanted to play a bunch, so I just turned those into light weaves. So you're going to have one of those specific options is what we're going to have access to. So I said, you know what, that's totally fine. We'll make sure that we have one of those. Now, we already talked about S1 through S4s. Rinzers have access to S1, S4, and S5. Well, light weaves have access to S1 through S5. So as far as the actual escalated augments we chose to go with, of course, Petal Gleam is still here. Of course, Escalating Pursuit is still here. But our S5 choice was Augment Bloom. Augment Bloom is purchasable with Rising Weapon Badge 5s, so you can pick that up from the 2nd floor in the red light district of the shopping area. Or you can buy it off of the market. People are selling it fairly inexpensively right now because it doesn't cost very many Rising Weapon Badges, and there's not a lot of use for it in PSO2 base, so super useful here. These weapons did get augmented, primarily because I just started augmenting them because I had the resources, and as soon as I started the process, I realized how deep I really was in, and I just couldn't stop. So I went along with them. Mostly these are SAFs, but I just picked out a couple of things that weren't too difficult for me to get a hold of and make. And I'll talk about where I got most of this stuff from as we go along. So for the Rinzers, I went with Astral Soul, a stat. It doesn't matter what stat you went with, but a stat. Aether Factor is the SAF of Rinzers and of Fluxios, so this was just really easy. As well as Phrase Decay being the SAF of a Basilisk weapon. Phrase again transfers in pretty well. And then Graceful Casting. Now, you're probably thinking, why'd you choose Graceful Casting? Well, the caps are all again homogenized, same as stats. So it doesn't really matter which one I went with. Technically speaking, the most optimal choice is Grace for cost versus benefit, but the benefit is only HP. In reality, you only need to get up to the noble caps for it to be useful as far as damage is concerned. And while we're leveling, we're not trying to min-max HP and PP as well as damage. Like, damage is just enough. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. Technically, you don't even have to augment these weapons. I just happen to have access to the stuff to go ahead and augment them, so I went ahead and did it. During the process itself, like halfway through, I kind of regretted it, but afterwards, honestly, it just looks nice. It's not too difficult to do, so I'm totally cool with it. I'm happy with what I did. As far as the weapons to use this, essentially it was just a Union or a Ray weapon. You'd plus 35 it. A dim weapon. Again, you can go with if you have a stat 5 choice here. That's totally fine because stat 5 and stat 6 are the same. Aether Factor is the SAF of the Rinzers themselves. Phrase Decay is of Basilisks. And then, of course, a capsule of your choosing that you have access to. It doesn't matter which one. Check your market. I came across the fact that someone was selling a bunch of the Graceful Casting caps. Fairly inexpensive compared to everything else. So I was like, all right, cool. I'm selling all my other caps and I'm buying a bunch of these and using these instead. So you'll see Graceful Casting on basically everything that I augmented. For the light weaves, we have, of course, Petal Gleam, Lucid Adversity, Aggressive Will, Escalating Pursuit, and Augment Bloom. And then the choice of the augments here were just Astral Soul, Might, and Graceful Casting. Now, just to note, a heads up about the souls, it can be any soul and it's all the same outside of Guardian Soul. Guardian Soul is the only one that's different. It's double the other soul types, but any soul is fine. So technically I didn't even have to go Astral Soul. I just did it because it was pretty and I had access to it. Again, not always the best choice, but you know, it's there. So you can go with any soul choice, not really a big deal. Again, stat, doesn't matter which stat, can be up to stat 5. And of course, Graceful Casting. And then the Flexio should be the same thing. Yeah, Flexio, same thing. Again, the choices on these, you have plenty of different options, and we're going to go over exactly what choices you do have here after we go over one more thing that I did forget to grab before the start of this video. Our units. So units are a bit different because our units are only 13 star. That means we don't have a 4-star slot choice for base PSO2. So in NGS, we will get better units, and the better units will be better defensively, but they may not be better offensively immediately. Keep that in mind, because the only way you're getting offensive stats from your units is going to be through augments. And if you guys checked out Animana's video he released recently, augmenting is pretty important and very, very useful. So let's talk about the unit choices we made. Again, this is just within those specific slot choices. So we went and grabbed some 2-star units. I grabbed a full set because I wanted the full set to look nice. It doesn't really matter which ones you pick up. Again, there are no sets in NGS, so that's make a difference, at least not that we know of as of right now. Now, originally, I was going to go ahead and go with just 8 slot units and be one with it, whatever had the nicest stuff towards them. But in reality, I was only getting maybe 6 augments that were actually useful, and they weren't all great. So I went ahead and said, you know what? I'll augment these because I found something that was really, really cool. So I spent probably about close to 20 mil on doing this, but there were augments on the market for Shiva Glare, Crack 3, and X-Allies Soul. And as you know, right now we have a boost week going on, so 2 Shiva Glares, 2 Crack 3s, 2 X-Allies Soul gives me just enough to put all of these on here, which is pretty comfy, honestly. Fairly easy to put together, fairly easy to do. Precision, this is just an SAF from any of the Novel units. So either the Novel or the Rivalate, depending upon what you have access to. Again, the 5 or the 6, same category. That's pretty simple there. Percent of Reverie, I happen to have the SAF for light streams. You could technically just do it by hand if you really want to. 2 Reveries are going to be enough with the proper boosts. And then, of course, Graceful Casting, because I had tons of caps left over from ones that I bought while I saw them on the market. So this is basically what you have on every single unit. They're all offensive stat choices, all going to be beneficial. And to be honest, it wasn't that expensive for me to do overall. But I would say go with what you have access to. You don't even have to augment these. Maybe just pick up 8 slot units. Maybe just pick up units and upgrade them. So the cool thing is you technically don't have to worry about augments. If you want to just have weapons and units and upgrade them to plus 35 and plus 10 and just kind of go with it from there, that's totally fine. Just do that because it's going to be a stat stick regardless. The augments are just kind of like the icing on the cake. Just having access to a weapon that you don't have to turn around and go, oh, well, I need to upgrade this weapon. I need to spend end grinders, got to spend end Maceta, so on and so forth, is going to be a great boon for you. You'll be able to stack up materials. Maybe you'll be able to sell those early materials for extra money to pick up new fashion in NGS. One thing to keep in mind. And we just did that for every weapon or every unit across the board. Of course, what we had access to, these were Precision 5, this was Precision 6. These are all Precision 6. So pretty cool there. I went ahead and went with sub barriers. Again, this is just like an aesthetic thing. I just want to have everything be the same. That way, you know, when I was equipping it, it was fairly easy to tell. And these will be fairly useful for me moving forward. I'll be able to level all my classes. When new classes come out, I'll still have these, and I'll have these set aside in my storage. Just go ahead and pop them on, start leveling. There might be a new leveling method by then. It might not be as difficult to level, so on and so forth. But at this point, we don't know. And while we don't know, honestly, in my opinion, is the best time to go ahead and take advantage of resources that we're not gonna be able to bring with us anyway. So this video is going to be a bit longer. I do apologize for the mention at the very start. I'm going over literally everything that I had, everything that I've set up, and pretty much every question anyone could possibly ask in these situations itself. So the last thing I wanted to talk about was the augment choices and kind of how they'll transfer over. That way you guys can make your own decisions on what you want to go ahead and go with moving forward. So give me just a second and we'll get that pulled up here for you. All right, guys. So this nifty little sheet, apparently, now granted, this was just told by me. I'm not 100% sure. I haven't actually looked into this myself personally, but told this sheet was actually created by a Ship 4 player by the name of Trash Kant. So kudos to you. Thank you so much. This was super helpful in setting up the choices I made for just overall my my augments when it came down to NGS. And it's got a bunch of really helpful things. We've got, you know, the weapon potential section that has all of the potentials and what they're transferring into. You have the comic codes, as well as just some information about NGS, you know, the choices of weapons, their weapon rarity table, all that good stuff. Super, super helpful. So you can see all of this all in one spot. Again, this will be in the video description, and then you get a trash can. But as far as augments go, you can kind of see why I made the decisions I made, and of course the grouping of things, right? So you can see 5s and 6s are together. You can see, let's see, a good choice for augmenting if you happen to have tons of these. Because we ran a bunch of cradle and things like that, you might have tons of these units left over. A lot of these happen to have lesser, lesser stat as their actual SAF for the special ability factor. So upgrading them, you can actually transfer it onto something fairly easy. And it's lesser 4. So it's a lesser 5. I mean, you can make lesser 5 if you really want to, but that's up to you. And like I mentioned, the souls are basically just half of Guardian Soul. So keep that in mind. Of course, the first pillar, or the first here, is going to be power. Power correction basically is dexterity. PP, HP, damage resistance, and stun resistance. So you've got power and power correction, so you have damage, and then of course dexterity, and then you have PP and HP. As you can see, still 2 PP, so it's pretty solid across the board, and it's only 10 more HP. So it's not like it's insane as far as 2 differences, but it is double of what the one underneath it is, so it's still valuable. Same as if you look at Guardian Soul versus Astral Soul. Guardian Soul is just double of what Astral Soul is, so it just happens to be a bit of a bigger number in PSO2 base versus NGS. So we just slot in any soul is fine. And then this kind of stays the same across the board for most everything else. Mana Reverie versus Reveries. I mean, Mana Reverie does give you the extra PP and HP. Glares versus Absolute Glare. You got an extra 1 PP and an extra 10 HP. Of course, double here as well. And then Factor versus Aether Factor, so on and so forth. Crack 3 and Crack 4 were the same, so I just left these as Crack 3 and didn't make them Crack 4. I didn't want to spend the money on making Crack 5. I felt like that was just too much. But you can see all these moving forward. You have Divine Order and Divine Will are the same. They're just Legacy Divisio. I'm sure it's going to be Legacy Divine or something like that. A lot of these were just translations that they pulled from CBT1. So some of these might have been changed. Some of these might have been data mined. I would say, go at it knowing that something might be different. It's a bit of a risk in a sense. So, and as you can see here, we're looking at the Noble caps. All the Noble caps are the same damage as the Grace and Grand caps. See, Noble and Elegant, Grace and Grand, same damage, same power correction, and same PP. Only difference is 10 HP. So realistically, you'd be fine right here. I went with these because actually the prices for these Graces that I found were actually cheaper than Nobles. So that's what I went with. You also have the option of just these boosts, which is pretty solid too. They're only half of what these are, but it's still pretty good overall. So if you happen to have tons of these saved up from doing, what is it called, the mission pass, then you'll be good to go there. You can just use those instead. And then of course the ailments are just ailments with PP, so won't worry too much about that. This is just percentages instead of actually flat, so that's a little bit interesting. I'm not sure if it's like percentage cost reduction or exactly what that's going to be, but it might also be a typo. So yeah, burn, freeze. Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is pretty self-explanatory. So the Escalating Augment slot, this is where it was most useful, at least this this sheet specifically, because you can see everything that's going to be under 1%, everything that's going to be under 2%. You can see why we used Augment, or we could have used Augment Will for these, but Augment Will is actually fairly expensive, especially for 24 weapons. Definitely not going to be spending the money for that. But 1% is good enough. My main weapons have Augment Will on them, so I went with those as my choice for that there. And then of course, Petal Gleam was in the 1% slot, so I just went with Petal Gleam. But Augment Will and Augment Bloom are the only ones that are 2%. So there might be other ones. Not everything is covered in this actual guide, but a lot of it is. So your mileage may vary a bit once it comes out. So this is PP cost reduction. Okay, so PP cost reduction is actually what it was set to. I didn't know if it was PP cost reduction or if it was just increased PP. So there we go. We actually now know officially. But essentially, Lucid Adversity S2 and S3 were 1% damage and 5% PP cost reduction, which is pretty freaking solid. Basically the best S2 and S3 slot we could have access to, because there is no 2% S2 and S3 slot. So very, very nice. Legacy Guard are these ones set. I mean, it's not too much, but something kind of crazy is Skydance support is still 2% damage while you're in the air, and 2% defense while you're in the air. So it's still fairly useful, and this doesn't count for shift or D-band. So this stacks with shift and D-band, making the S8 choice pretty self-explanatory if you happen to have access to it. An Escalating Pursuit, like I mentioned, adds 50% of the damage dealt in 5 seconds. I'm sorry, after hitting a PA or technique to the damage of the next PA/technique. So if this has no cooldown, that's crazy powerful. If it has a cooldown, it's still really good. So pretty nice there. And then of course you can look at all of the S6s, S7s, and S8 choices down here are just 1% as long as they're just stat. So as far as your choices go when it comes down to weapons and units, you can see why I made the decisions that I made. But I would say look through these, see what you can get access to. Don't break the bank over this sort of thing. Again, it's not absolutely required to enjoy NGS. You'll still have a good time overall. But that about covers everything, guys. Thanks so much for watching all the way into the video. As always, like on the video is much appreciated. Absolves your half your ad block guilt. The other half is absolved by subscribing. Both are completely free and they do help me out a ton. If you guys want to keep up with content as it goes up, make sure to click on the bell icon to be notified of videos as well as community posts, or join us over on Discord or follow me over on Twitter for notifications via those 2 avenues. Thank you so much for watching all the way in. Again, don't forget to comment, Endgang, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care. Peace out.